In the digital age, online platforms like Craigslist offer convenience and accessibility, making it easier than ever to buy and sell items. From furniture to electronics, the possibilities seem endless, and for many, the thrill of finding a great deal or getting rid of unwanted items is an everyday occurrence. However, behind these seemingly harmless transactions lies a darker side, one filled with danger and uncertainty. While the convenience of Craigslist and similar online marketplaces is undeniable, it's crucial to understand the potential risks that come with meeting strangers in real life for a deal. In this world of digital connections, we must remember one particular evening, in the quiet, small town of Crestwood, California, I thought I was simply going to pick up a free Maplewood TV stand I had found on Craigslist. The ad seemed too good to be true, offered by a woman named Emily, who claimed her boyfriend was heading off to the military, and they needed to clear out his things. It seemed like a straightforward transaction, one that many of us have experienced. I was eager to add a piece of furniture to my apartment and save a bit of money. But little did I know, this seemingly innocent encounter would quickly escalate into a terrifying disaster. I texted Emily, expressing interest, and within minutes, she replied, sounding friendly and accommodating. We agreed on a time to meet that evening. She even sent me her address without hesitation, which made me feel comfortable. In today's world, trusting people we meet online has almost become second nature. We tell ourselves, it's just a simple exchange. But beneath that veneer of normalcy lurks an unthorough as the punk. At that moment, the first warning bell should have gone off. The request to let myself in was strange, but my desire to get the stand and the inconvenience of driving out here kept me going. I pushed the door open, the sound of the creak echoing through the empty house. It was eerily quiet, too quiet. As I stepped inside, I was hit with the unmistakable smell of mildew, and the dim lighting only added to the unsettling atmosphere. I called out, but no one answered. Then I heard it. A voice from upstairs, faint and distant, called me to come up, but there was something about it. The pitch wasn't quite right. It sounded off, almost unnatural. I responded, trying to sound casual, but the sense of dread was starting to build inside me. "Emily?" I asked, my voice shaky as I began ascending. Halfway up, the voice responded again, but this time it was clearer. "Yeah, come on up here." I froze. This wasn't Emily's voice. It was a man's voice, deep and gravelly, pretending to be hers. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I hesitated. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, I told myself. But by the time I reached the top of the stairs, I was no longer sure of anything. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down two separate hallways. One was the obvious path towards an open bedroom door where I thought. The voice called again, this time more forcefully. "Come in over here." It didn't sound like Emily at all. In that moment, I realized I was dealing with someone dangerous, someone who had lured me into a trap. My body acted before my mind could fully catch up. I turned on my heels and bolted down the stairs, hearing the door swing open behind me. I didn't look back. I was already out the door and in my car, speeding away before I even fully processed what had happened. I felt a rush of relief as I drove, my hands gripping T-Mobile. Later, I blocked the number and tried to report the ad, but it had already been taken down. I tried not to think about it too much, convincing myself that I had escaped unharmed, but the memory haunted me. How close had I come to something far worse? What if I hadn't trusted my instincts and kept going up those stairs? The questions lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of how quickly a seemingly innocent exchange. This experience, though frightening, wasn't unique. Similar stories are shared by countless people who have unknowingly walked into dangerous situations through online transactions. The truth is, Craigslist and other online marketplaces, while convenient, are breeding grounds for predators. Strangers post ads, and many are too quick to meet up without giving it a second thought. There's an illusion of safety, of control, but it's important to read those. The dangers are not limited to just Craigslist either. They extend to all online platforms that facilitate in-person transactions. Meeting someone you've only spoken to online, in private spaces, or in unfamiliar locations can put you at risk. The truth is, you don't really know who you're dealing with until you meet face to face. And even then, You can't always trust your instincts until it's too late. It's crucial to be aware of the signs of a potential scam or danger. A sudden change in plans, a request to meet in a secluded or unfamiliar location, or pressure to go into someone's home. These should all raise red flags. If something feels off, trust that feeling. Don't ignore it, even if you've already made plans or feel like you're being overly cautious. It's better to cancel a deal than to risk your safety. In today's connected world, we often believe that our online interactions are safe, especially when using well-known platforms. But we must never forget that behind every post, there is a real person, and not all of them have good intentions. The convenience of online marketplaces comes at a cost. The cost is the loss of control. The cost is the risk of encountering someone who sees you as an opportunity, not just a buyer. We all have stories of close calls, but it's crucial to recognize these moments as wake-up calls. Protecting ourselves is not just about being cautious, but also about acknowledging the vulnerabilities that come with using online services. If you ever find yourself in a situation that doesn't feel right, don't hesitate to walk away. Trust yourself, and remember, your safety is a criminal. So next time you're browsing Craigslist or another online marketplace, keep these lessons in mind. Take a moment to think about the situation, and most importantly, trust your gut. In a world where convenience can sometimes blind us to danger, it's vital to remain vigilant and make safety your priority, because no deal It was supposed to be a simple transaction, just another ordinary evening of buying and selling through Craigslist. I had found an ad for a Dell touchscreen laptop, priced at $250. The description was brief but enticing. In good condition, with only a few minor scratches. For the price, it seemed like a steal. My mind raced with the possibilities. This could be the laptop I needed for work, or at the very least, a great deal that I couldn't pass up. So I texted the seller, who introduced himself as Dave, and we quickly agreed to meet that evening at 10 p.m. in a Hiljeans. The plan seemed harmless enough. After all, I'd done transactions like this before. A public place, neutral, well lit, with plenty of people around. It was the ideal spot for a Craigslist transaction, or so I thought. But the series of events that unfolded that night would make me question my own judgment, my trust in others, and how something so ordinary could so easily spiral into a situation far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. As the evening approached, I felt a faint unease creeping in, a small voice in my head telling me to be careful. I tried to push it aside, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. I had done this before, hadn't I? I'd met strangers in parking lots for deals, exchanged cash for items, and walked away without a second thought. This time would be no different, or so I thought. I arrived at the 7-Eleven at exactly 10 p.m., just as planned. The parking lot was quiet. There were a few cars scattered around, but no sign of Dave. I waited, growing increasingly impatient as the minutes passed. By 10:10, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number he had given me. It rang several times before he finally picked up. His voice sounded distant, and there was a lot of background noise, as if he doubled me. "Hey, it's me, Dave," he said, sounding out of breath. "I'm not going to be able to make it to the 7-Eleven. My car's making some strange noises, and I don't want to drive too far from home. I pulled over to a side street just a few minutes away. Can you come meet?" I didn't know what to think. Something felt off, but I told myself I was just being overly cautious. I asked him for directions, and he provided me with a vague explanation, describing some dark side road somewhere near the outskirts of town. There was no mention of any streetlights or landmarks, just fields and open roads. It sounded odd, but I didn't want to back out now. I had already driven this far, and I wasn't about to waste the trip. I told him I'd head that way, and he hung up. I typed the location into my GPS and began driving. As I drove farther from the town center, the streets became less familiar. The road grew narrower, darker, with no streetlights to guide me. The surroundings were entirely rural, fields stretching for miles on either side, no sign of civilization. At this point, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The rational part of my mind kept telling me to turn off. I drove for another 5 minutes, my headlights cutting through the darkness. Then, in the distance, I saw it, Another set of headlights reflected back at me. I pulled up behind the car, which was parked on the side of the road, just as Dave had described. But when I turned off my headlights to save my battery for a moment, the world around me went completely dark. Nothing. I could see nothings, no cars, just an endless expanse of dark fields. I turned the headlights back on, but there was still no sign of movement from the car in front of me. No other lights, no reflection from a phone, nothing. I sat there, my stomach sinking as the silence pressed in on me. I tried calling Dave again, my heart beating fast. He replied, "I'm just running into the crops to take a quick piss. Just get in my car, and when I get back, I'll show you the laptop." His tone was calm, almost too calm, but I didn't want to appear rude or suspicious. "Okay," I said, my voyage. For a moment, I considered driving away. I considered going back to town, telling myself that I would just have to let the deal go. But my curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't sure what I thought would happen next, but I told myself that I would be fine. I left the car running and stepped out, my feet crunching against the gravel as I looked nervously at the woods before. In that instant, every part of my body screamed at me to run. I jumped into my car, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't even bother to lock it. My hands were shaking too much. I threw the car into gear and floored the accelerator. The tires screeched as I sped off, not caring about where I was going or how fast I was driving. All I could think about was getting as far better. The fear didn't subside until I finally reached the main road, where the lights from the town broke the darkness. It was then that I realized how lucky I had been. Had I stayed just a few moments longer, I could have been in a much worse situation. As I drove home, my hands were still shaking. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see a car following me. That night, I blocked Dave's number. I didn't want to hear from him again, and I never went back to that side road. I didn't report the incident to the police, but the memory of it stayed with me, a constant reminder of how quickly things can go wrong when you meet strangers online. That night, I learned a valuable lesson. No deal is worth putting yourself in danger for. My curiosity and desire for a cheap laptop. Looking back, I realized how easily I could have ignored my gut feeling and ended up in a much darker situation. Craigslist and similar platforms are filled with potential opportunities, but they also come with hidden risks that we can easily overlook. The next time I look at an ad, I'll think twice, not just about the item I'm purchasing, but about the person I'm meeting. It's easy to let your guard down when you think you're just getting a good deal, but there's I had always heard stories about Craigslist transactions going wrong, but I never thought I would become part of one. It was just supposed to be a simple sale. I had an old bicycle I no longer used, and I needed the space in my garage. So I listed it on Craigslist, hoping to get a couple of $100 in return. At first, there were no responses. After a few days, I was starting to get a little discouraged. But then, late one afternoon, I got a text from someone named Jeffrey asking if the bike was still available. He was very direct, asking if I told him he could come by anytime. He responded quickly, saying he'd be there within the next half hour. I felt a sense of relief. Finally, someone was interested in buying the bike. I was home alone that day, which I didn't think much of at the time. My wife and son had gone out shopping, and my older son was out with his friends, so it was just me in the house. I didn't expect anything unusual. I had been on Craigslist before, met up with people in public spaces, and sold a few things with no problems. This would be no different, I told myself, Mom. When I saw the car pull up, I watched out the window as 3 grown men got out. My heart sank a little. Why would anyone need to bring 2 extra people to look at a bike? The situation already felt off, but I didn't want to seem rude or judgmental, so I tried to push the unease away. One of the men, Jeffrey, stepped forward and introduced himself. He was big, tall and muscular, with a thick beard and a deep voice that immediately set me on edge. He didn't introduce his friends, who just stood silently behind him, staring at me with empty expressions. Something about their presence felt threatening, but I pushed those thoughts down and tried to stay calm. I invited them around to the back of the house, where I kept the bike in the shed. As I led them through the yard, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I noticed how Jeffrey's friends kept their eyes on me, not speaking, but just observing. When we got to the back, I pointed out the bike and began explaining its condition. Jeffrey didn't seem too interested in what I was saying. Instead, he began inspecting the bike with meticulous care, looking at every detail, even the small imperfections that no one amused. While he was doing that, his two friends stood off to the side, watching me. One of them suddenly asked to use the bathroom. I hesitated. It was an odd request, but I didn't want to make a scene. I gave him directions to the bathroom inside, but as he disappeared into the house, I began to feel more and more uncomfortable. Why had they all come together? Why I told Jeffrey I was going to fetch something from the shed, a way to buy myself some time to think. As I walked away, I started to realize how strange this whole situation was. Jeffrey was still poking at the bike, asking questions about minor flaws, things I had never even thought to mention before. As I turned back toward the shed, I thought I heard footsteps inside the house. I brushed it off as nothing, but the feeling in my gut only grew stronger. When I returned to the house, I found that the bathroom was empty, but something felt wrong. I heard faint voices coming from downstairs. It was strange that they were all up there now, and the quiet tension in the air was palpable. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but I didn't want to make things awkward. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Then I heard one of them, Jeffrey, call my name from upstairs. His voice was low, and there was a certain edge to it. "Hey, we just want to talk to you," he said. My heart started racing. This wasn't right. This was not how a normal transaction should go. I should have left right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I froze. The next few seconds felt like they dragged. I quietly slipped into the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. I whispered as quietly as I could to the operator, explaining the situation. I told her there were 3 men in my house, and I was afraid they were going to harm me. She instructed me to stay where I was, to lock the door, and to remain calm until the police arrived. I could hear footsteps coming up the stairs now, the sound of heavy boots thudding against the wooden floors. I held my breath as the door handle rattled. Someone tried to turn it, but thankfully it was locked. Then I heard one of them mutter, "He's in there." I was trapped, and they knew I was in the bathroom. The next few seconds were terrifying. They started banging on the door, trying to break it down. Each thud made my heart skip a beat. I screamed through the door, "The cops are almost." I stayed quiet, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I didn't know what they were going to do next. The banging stopped after a while, but the silence that followed was almost worse. I could hear them whispering to each other, and then their footsteps grew quieter as they walked downstairs. My fear was palpable. It felt like hours before I finally heard sirens outside. The police arrived, and I rushed out of the bathroom, almost collapsing with relief. They quickly cleared the house, finding that my wallet, some watches, and my iPad had been taken. The bike was gone too, but the most important thing was that I was still alive. The officers told me that the men had likely intended to kill me if I hadn't locked myself in that bathroom. The thought of what could have happened, the event changed me. I couldn't shake the fear that lingered after that night. It haunted me, and it made me realize how quickly a situation could turn dangerous when you least expect it. I had been so focused on the transaction, so eager to make a sale, that I ignored the warning signs, the odd behavior of the men, the way they looked at me, the strange request for the bathroom. I never should have let them in my house, never should have let my guard down. I learned an invaluable lesson that night. No deal is worth risking your safety. And no matter how normal or innocent a Craigslist transaction may seem, there are always hidden dangers. We live in a world where not everyone has good intentions, and the moment we let our guard down is the moment we put ourselves at risk. If I had trusted my instincts from the start, I could have avoided that terrifying encounter, but I didn't, and it almost cost me everything. That night was a harsh reminder that in the world of online transactions, the buyer and seller are not always who they seem. Sometimes people hide their true intentions behind a smile, and we have to learn to recognize the signs Always trust your instincts, especially when dealing with strangers online. If something feels off, don't be afraid to walk away, cancel the deal, or change the meeting location. Your safety should always come first. Make sure to keep your loved ones informed about where you're going and who you're meeting. Trust your gut and be aware of your surroundings. Subscribe for more real-life lessons and safety tips.